My name is Charles Fowler, F-O-W-L-E-R. I was born in Attala County, Mississippi. The closest town was Kosciusko, Mississippi, K-O-S-C-I-U-S-K-O. Born of a mother of 12 children.
12 children.
My father died in 1938 and left my mother with 11 children and one on the way. And we moved to the city of Kosciusko in 1939. And I had 5 brothers in World War II, and they're all deceased now. In 1944, our home burned up. Everything that we had burnt. And then in 1946, my mother built a grocery store. And in 1949, I went into service. Went to Keesler Air Force Base with 5 other high school students. And 2 of us passed to go in the Air Force, and 4 didn't, and them 4 persuaded all of us to go to the Army. The Army and the Air Force was together then in 1949.
Huh.
And so we went to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and as well as I remember, I took 18 weeks of basic training and went from there to Fort Benning, Georgia, the 3rd Infantry Division. Stayed there till in the winter of 1949, we went to Little Creek, Virginia, and took amphibious training, and left there and went on a ship and went to and had made an amphibious landing on the Vieques Island off the coast of Puerto Rico. And then we come back into South Carolina and came back to Fort Benning. And I took a short discharge after being in service a year and went home on a 30-day leave. And when I come back, I had orders to go to Korea. The Korean War broke out on 19th of July of 1950.
1950.
Right, 1950.
So 19th of July.
Yeah, the Korean War broke out June the 25th.
Right, so it's been just several weeks.
Right, and the Marines had loaded up on ships. We didn't know, we thought they were fixing to evacuate and go back to Japan because the war done pushed back that far. And so then we didn't know they were going around to Incheon. And I'm not sure about the dates, but sometime in September, last of September of 1950, we got orders to fight our way to Yeongdeung-po and meet the Marines coming from Incheon. They landed at Incheon, and I think it's about in October of 1950. I'm not sure there about the dates. I was 17 when I went in service.
17.
17.
And when you heard about Korean War broke out, were you aware of Korea at the time?
Never heard of Korea.
You never heard of Korea?
Never heard.
Mm.
Well, I could have in studying history, but I just, as a young boy, I just wasn't, hadn't been hadn't been nowhere out of the United States. Primarily was the southern states I'd been in Florida and different places as a young boy traveling.
So would you please describe the front line of the Busan perimeter when you arrived in July 19th?
In Korea,
yeah.
Very hot. It was very hot.
Uh-huh.
I remember I pulled my shirt off and had to dig a foxhole. And of course our line was there and we had to dig a foxhole. And of course I was in the combat engineers. And I got blistered all over. I'm very light skinned. And one of the officers got mad at me because I got blistered. And I never will forget what he said. He said, you know how you can keep that from happening? And dumb me, I said, how? And he said, keep your clothes on. And so, I've never got sunburned since that day. I remember those words, and so I don't sunbathe. The only thing I can remember basically was we fought our way up through Tegu and Taejon. I don't know which one's first, there. One of the cities got destroyed real bad. The enemy was there, and we pushed them back, all the way back to Kempo Air Force Base. I remember that. And then I helped build a bridge across the river there at Sewell. What was the Han River? That Han River there.
Han River, yes.
They called that bridge I believe, I want to say Al Jolson Bridge or something like that. I'm not sure the name of it. And later, this is way later, when after the war and everything, I mean after me being on a hospital ship and coming back, I helped blow up that bridge when we were retreating back.
Yeah.
That's 51, I guess, I'm not sure. But anyway, we went all the way to the Manchurian border. And the mistake we made probably was fighting our way up the highway, the roads, and didn't go into the mountains as much as we should have. And of course, the enemies got behind us, especially when the Chinese came in. And we went all the way, of course, went through the capital of North Korea, Pyongyang. What is Pyongyang? Pyongyang. Went through that, and it's like when I went through Sewell, wasn't nobody in Sewell. A few snipers in those high buildings and shooting at us, you know. But other than that, everybody had evacuated. Can you imagine that city as large as it is? Nobody in it, you know. Of course, people going for their lives, you know, women and children going south, you know. When we were going north, everybody was going south. And of course, I guess the hardest thing I remember is the North Koreans even used children as decoys, wanting us to kill children. And I never killed a child, but I mean, I seen one throw a hand grenade on a friend of mine, and someone else shot him after that. I didn't shoot him. But some horrible things in war, women and children. And then I guess probably the most horrible thing was when our planes began to shoot the napalm in, and people that it hit would be just like that, dead, just burnt, you know, just like that.
You still see that image?
Yeah, yes, I can see it as it was today. And then one time, it seemed like I remember that our airstrikes hit us, hit not my company, but hit a company right beside of us, an artillery company, and destroyed almost half of them by mistake. Of course, war does that.
Absolutely.
And but then we went all the way, just like I said, went all the way. And the other thing I remember about North Korea was, of course, you know anything about the country, they fertilized their trees and stuff with human waste. Anyway, they had the biggest apples I ever seen in my life, and we were told not to eat them, but we were hungry. We eat them. They were good. They were delicious.
Delicious.
Yeah, it didn't hurt me. I mean, I'm still alive at 80 years old. But the best apple, I never seen an apple that big. And I guess one of the things that when you're in war like that, you do lots of things that you don't think about. I guess the awfulest thing I ever eat, and knew I eat it, didn't know I was eating it when I ate it, and that was I ate a cat. Some kids skinned a cat, and we didn't know it was a cat, and we bought the cat and cooked it, and ate it, but it was delicious. And what I remember was it was so cold, coming out of a climate in July where it was so hot, and then it was so cold, and then it began to rain, and then it began to freeze, and then it began to snow. And we was in foxholes, and the water was in there, and my clothes began to freeze to my body. And my shoes, I took my shoes off and bathed my feet in snow. Put my shoes back on, tried to wipe them clean. And then my feet froze to my shoes. And as well as I remember, that's, of course, the Chinese that came in and cut us off. This is sometime in December or January, somewhere in there. I don't know exactly.
I think as I said, December.
And it was so cold.
Mm.
And they brought a helicopter in with a little capsule on the side. And the only kind of helicopter they had back then. And they put me in that capsule and flew me out back to Incheon, well, to Ascom City. And then they took me out to Incheon, and then I went on a landing craft out to a hospital ship. And I got on that, and an army doctor was on there. I never will forget what he said. He said, "I'm gonna give you a free trip to the United States." I said, "Well, that's great." And of course, I wasn't but 18 years old. He said, "Sign this paper." I said, "What is it?" He said, "I'm gonna amputate both of your feet." One of the most horrible things is we got orders to lay down and let them overrun us in one occasion. And I can't remember to this day whether that was the North Koreans at the time or the Chinese, because they came in they came across on the ice, across the river, and I understand I was told they had a tunnel also under the river that they came across. But it was just like masses of them, hundreds of them, and they run over us. I was in a foxhole dug in, and they run over us just like we wasn't there, didn't know we were there. And when they come in those masses like that, if you shot them, there was somebody behind them picking up their weapons. It didn't have a weapon. Yes, it was unbelievable. You know, you look back on it, and just as a young boy, I was just a young 18 years old. All we knew, it was the enemies, you know. At the time, really, I can't remember where they even probably didn't know that there were Chinese right at that time, until rumors began to flourish between us peons, I call it, back during that time.
Was there a rumor?
Yeah, at that time, they were telling us, you know, the Chinese is in. And then we got word well, we knew that the MiGs were coming across and shooting at us from China. And our jets would only come in to the Yellow River and had to turn around. They couldn't come back. And we got word, this is sometime in that period, I don't know exactly, we got word that MacArthur wanted to go over and bomb them. And we were all for that, you know, as a young soldier. And we thought it was awful that the President Truman fired MacArthur at the time. But now, look back in retrospective, he couldn't do nothing but that, because we couldn't have, that's what makes our country great, because the President, no general tells the President what to do. In other words, that's how these countries military takes over the country. And so he had to do what he did. Politically, it was suicide, but he had to do it. But as a young soldier in combat, knowing what was going on, we couldn't rationalize only coming to a river and couldn't go across that river to get the enemy that was shooting at us. And the only way we could shoot the Chinese was after they got in the battle with us. Then that, you know, that it was on our side then, as long as it was on this side of the Yellow River, but couldn't go across the Yellow River. In which militarily, that's not good military defense.
Told me that you went to barber college and you worked as a barber, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you went into
Then
seminary?
The Lord saved me in 1964. I trusted Jesus Christ as my personal Savior in 64, at the age of 32 years old. And then God called me to preach. And so I knew that I needed some formal education that I didn't have biblically. And so God opened up the door for me to go to the largest seminary in the world, Southwestern at Fort Worth, Texas. And I went there in 1965, and I graduated in 1969. I later did extended work and got my doctorate degree in Orlando, Florida. But you can't buy a cup of coffee with that. You know, it's just something that title that people put on you. I don't make mention of it too much. But anyway, I pastored from 1967. I pastored while I was in seminary at a church in Fort Worth, Texas. First church I ever pastored, Melody Hill Baptist Church. And I pastored in Mississippi, Tennessee, Pocatello, Idaho. Yeah, I pastored for 3 years in Pocatello, which is the second largest city in the state of Idaho. 70% Mormon people. I had a minister. I started a ministry on the campus of Idaho State University while I was there, and had a great response there. And the only Southern Baptist church in the town of 50,000 people. And I pastored till I turned 70 years old, 10 years ago. And I resigned and retired from pastoring, but I still preach. Because the South Korean soldiers really fought to preserve their freedom. And lots of times we fail to make mention of that. They died and they bled and they fought to try to save their country. It wasn't just the United Nations soldiers that preserved South Korea. The South Korean soldiers fought right on the front line, all the way up North Korea. And
that's an important point.
yeah. Of course, they couldn't speak English and I couldn't speak Korean, so I couldn't communicate, but we communicated in many ways as just a young boy. And most of the soldiers that probably are dead now, of the older generation that were there when I was there. The one guy and I didn't tell you this a while ago, when I was in Germany, the only person that I met that was in my outfit in Germany, was in Korea, when I got frostbitten, flew out, he got captured. And he was taken into China. No, he might have not been taken into China. He might have been just North Korea. But anyway, they took all his fingernails and toenails and eyebrows and eyelashes, and he came to Germany and shared, going around to the different military bases sharing this. And he didn't have any toenails and eyelashes and eyebrows.
Was it part of torture?
Oh yeah, he was bared up to his neck. Insects just crawled all in his ears and everything. He shared that. That's the only person, and I can't even remember his name, but he was a master sergeant, and he was my platoon sergeant. And when I flew out, he got captured, and that's the only person that I haven't met since the Korean War that was in my outfit then. And he was older than me. He probably just, I don't know his year. He'd have to be in his 90s now if he is living. And most of the Korean that were in there when I was there are dead.
How would you characterize the impact of Korean War upon your life after you came back from Korea? You become pastor, right?
I think it matured me and made me more appreciative of life and more aware of the the cruelty of war, and the more thankful that I am that I live in America, that live in a country of freedom. Most Americans take it for granted, the younger generation especially. And the wars are so different now. I'd have a hard time being in Afghanistan simply because you don't know who you're fighting. And if you kill the wrong person, you're liable to get prosecuted for that. Terrible situation.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the Korean War was forgotten. I mean, I don't detect that. I think they didn't never declare it a war, and that was probably the worst thing. You know, lose 50,000 people, and the biggest critic can't deny that we saved South Korea from becoming a communist country, and history has proven that democracy works. It's probably one of the growingest and two things that's really outplayed in South Korea. One is the Christian faith has been spreaded there. The Presbyterian Church really grew in South Korea.
Yes.
And the economy, on democracy, of how the economies work, it's probably one of the richest countries, and how long it'll last that way, I don't know. But you know, it's been opened up to free market, and the individual ingenuity, you know, have created things, vehicles, different things. That would have never happened under communist control. See, so I feel like it. I don't feel. I mean, I don't know of any. I never have listened to a nut that would talk about the Korean War was wrong. You know, I'm sure there's people out there, because we've got some real liberal people in the United States that any kind of war where you're defending somebody or what, you know, they're opposed to it.
So how would you characterize the legacy of Korean War veterans?
Well, I feel like they'd be characterized as people that defended a sovereign nation, a country, and that they ought to not be put on a pedestal, but they ought to be honored. Just like my brothers that were in service during World War II, they were honored when they came back to the States. It was a horrible war. Had to drop an atomic bomb on. I've often thought in my mind, you know, if MacArthur would have been given the go-ahead, he would have dropped an atomic bomb on China, you know. And that country now is probably one of the growingest countries in the world too, economically. And I think the Korean War in history ought to be characterized as an event that ought to be a showcase to the world that communism doesn't work. It enslaves people and their freedom to act, and democracy is right for the free mind, gives a person to be creative as God has created us all to be. I wish the two countries would get together, you know, and you know, they both Korea, you know, and philosophy of life separates, you know, one on a tire type thing of rule, dominating people, keeping people down, and the other is lifting people up. Some way, somehow, they get together, and they might not, well, I believe, I'm not away from the military now. I believe the North Korean people, I believe the South Korean people would love to see a unified country. It's just like Germany, you know, when it takes a leader though to do this. You take, when Reagan says, Reagan tried to break down this wall, you know, he was willing to take a change and as a world leader and say this is wrong. Somebody's got to do that in Korea. Now, where they got somebody that powerful, somebody with a voice, you know, not in a demanding way, but yet in a I don't know how to say it, in a coming together way, you know, not one side over against the other side. I don't think he's gonna do it by, I'm gonna lay my arms down, you gonna lay your arms down. That's not gonna happen.